How does that actually play out in terms of the number of likely markets that we're going to see around what is, let's face it, as you said, a cornucopia of different possibilities for carbon?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say exactly what it's going to look like, but if you look at a market like natural gas, you have multiple natural gas prices around the world. You have multiple different delivery points for natural gas, but really you have Henry Hub, TTF, NBP, so US gas, Dutch gas, UK gas. If you're not sort of deep in gas markets, and then you have LNG, and that's kind of your global benchmark of gas price. And the Italians will complain that we're not mentioning theirs, and the Germans will complain. But frankly, it's all based around the Dutch gas. So you could easily see a situation like that developing in the carbon market as well, where you have 4 or 5 global benchmarks, but you maybe have 100 different prices around it. I think you're not going to get to 100 sort of immediately. I think the market is probably going to contract and converge first around the benchmarks, and then once you've established liquidity around the benchmarks, you're going to start to then see basis prices create around it. But again, it's where we have the flexibility to help serve the market as that develops, and that's really what we've done here, is help the market by creating the benchmarks and creating the instruments out the gate.
So it's very interesting because obviously Xpansiv, you've had actually an amazing expansion over the course of the years. What does your market structure look like in terms of user base? I mean, have you lots of commodity players, financial players, or is it carbon projects themselves?
So this is where it's really important that I give credit to the guys in CBL and all the hard work that they did over the years, when many other people within the carbon markets, including myself, I'll be honest, sort of looked at the carbon offset space and said, it's interesting, but it's a bit hairy and it might never count anything. But they stuck at it, right? And they really built those relationships and built the networks. So to the point where we have about 150 project developers onboarded on our platform today. So that's sort of the starting point, right? So we've got very good connections on the supply side. And then historically, if you look at the space, you've had sort of specialized market participants and specialized environmental traders. What we're increasingly seeing now is the introduction of established commodity traders, established energy firms, very large financial institutions, all entering the space. And again, a large part of that is now driven by the fact that you have these standardized products, you have these financial instruments and tools that they do recognize and know how to use. It's easier to get your risk manager through trading something that has a futures contract associated with it on the CFTC regulated exchange than it is to get their head around sort of individual projects in a developing country. So we're definitely now, I think I've said this other places, our biggest challenge at the moment is managing the inflow of new participants and the onboarding of the new participants, because obviously we need to undertake our KYC checks, background requirements, setting everyone up with accounts, etc. So it's increasingly becoming very much what you would expect to have in any established commodity market, Patrick, with a mix of market participants, but I think there's still a ton of growth to be had in this space.
We're talking carbon with Henrik Hasselknippe, the energy and carbon markets. He's with Xpansiv. We're talking about their spot exchange and also their relationships into the futures markets with CME and others. Henrik, fascinating to hear about this and how you deal with so many different enterprises, different projects. You mentioned 300 just a couple of minutes ago. Explain to me one thing. Your registries, what sort of technology are you running there? Is there a lot of blockchain usage, for example?
Yeah, good question. So on the registry side, it's important to point out that we do 2 things. So one is that we connect into all of the existing registries. So that would be your Verra and ACR, American Carbon Registry, Climate Action Reserve in California. We've built sort of direct connectivity to those. And then also we've done the same thing on the renewable energy side for sort of renewable energy credits in the US. That's all based on the existing technology that's in place at the registry level. So in many ways, that's where you've got probably the most outdated technology, but again, that's not controlled technology that we control ourselves directly, but somewhere we've just built pipes to it. But then we also operate our own registries. So that's where in some of the new markets that we're getting into now, like methane performance certificates or differentiated natural gas, where these markets don't exist today. But we've talked to market participants who say that there's a demand for it, there's a need for it. And there we actually operate the registries ourselves. And there we do use the latest state-of-the-art distributed ledger type technology approaches. I'm not a technologist, as you'll soon find out, but that's where we're leapfrogging. And we're using, instead of on the existing technologies, we've found a way to deal with yesterday's technology in a seamless and meaningful way. But if we're now creating these new things from scratch, we're going to use state-of-the-art.